The Batteries Included podcast is brought to you with United Chargers and their Grizzly range. The next generation of Grizzly is here. Meet the Grizzly Ultimate, the most powerful AC Level 2 charger for home use. With a maximum current of 80 amps, that's 19.2 kilowatts. Your vehicle could be charged up to twice as fast as a standard level 2 and up to 15 times faster than a level 1. And of course, it's Wi-Fi connected, so you can take control of your home charging, view stats, set a charging schedule, take part in demand response programs, and control your charger remotely. And that joins the lineup alongside the original Grizzly Classic. The Grizzly Duo, designed to charge two vehicles at the same time. The Grizzly Mini, a portable charging station. And the Grizzly Smart, a revolutionary smart EV charger. Those chargers can adjust the current from 16 amps up to 40 amps, that's 9.6 kilowatts. Plus, the Grizzly Ranger IP67 rated, built in Canada, and with the highest quality materials. You can order yours right now. Go to unitedchargers.com, that's unitedchargers.com. Hello and welcome to the Batteries Included podcast. It's Friday, September 27th, and this is episode 56. On today's show, we'll be talking about the US proposed ban on Chinese tech in US EVs. Kia gets access to the Tesla supercharger network on a very specific date. And the Tesla Model Y is poised to take the crown of the current incumbent number one. Who is that? We'll find out. And of course, much, much more. I'm your host today, Martin Lee, from the EV News Daily audio podcast. Joining us today is the tenacious Mr. Tom Malogany, senior editor at Inside EVs and host of the YouTube channel State of Charge. And we are missing two of our brothers, our partners in crime, our gang from the treehouse. We're 50% full today because they're off doing an adventure. Dominic and Kyle are both driving cars. And Tom, I haven't seen it, but there's a Facebook post this morning where Kyle spills all, so now we can talk about it. What's happening?
Yeah, so sorry guys, you're stuck with the two least interesting of the four people in the podcast here, but you're gonna have to bear with us today. Kyle is without a spec has organized a coast to coast sort of race, but it's not a typical race as you would expect with Kyle. It's mostly about charging. So he's got a whole bunch of cars, like 10 EVs, some of the longest range, fastest charging electric vehicles. And they're going to be driving from Seattle, Washington to Boston, Massachusetts. They had asked me if I wanted to participate. Of course, Martin could have participated if he wanted to, but he's on another continent. It might have been a little bit easier for me to do it. But unfortunately, I couldn't be part of it because I have a lot of things scheduled for this weekend. And it's going to take like 3 or 4 days between flying out there, doing the drive, charging, and then getting back home. So I couldn't, but Dom did take Kyle up on it. And Dom's going to be in one of the vehicles. There'll be a team in each car. So there's like 30 people involved in this because there's about 10 cars. And I think each car has like 3 people. Out of spec Dave's involved, a whole bunch of people. Kyle reached out to a lot of people that we all know in the industry and asked them if they wanted to be in one of the cars. So that's going to be a really fun video, really fun thing to watch. But that's why we're just running with Martin and me here today, guys.
Absolutely. But we need you in the comments today. So if you are taking part in the live show, I know we mentioned this might be not live this week and we might do a pre-record with all of us late on a Thursday night. But again, because of the event that they're doing, we just couldn't align it. So I thought, well, we'll be here with you in the comments. And so we need to lean on you really hard in the comments. So make sure you're chipping in with what you think about all the topics and ask any questions as well. You can be the fellow hosts of the podcast today as we get into all the topics. Before we get into our headline topic, and if you've seen the thumbnail on YouTube or the picture we put out, which was the Lotus Emaya, it's because that's going to be a car built in China for the US. We could have used other pictures like Polestars or Volvos. That's all about the US banning Chinese technology in EVs. We'll get to that in a moment. But Tom, you took delivery of a Silverado this week. What's going on?
Not quite delivery.
Okay. I over-egged the pudding a little bit.
Well, I guess I took delivery of a loan. So yeah, Chevrolet gave me a Silverado EV for the next week. I'll be able to make some fun content with that. I haven't just barely driven it. I got it late yesterday, so it's just been parked out in the garage. But I got it the night before. It's just yesterday. My whole day was pretty much booked. So I've driven it like 10 miles. Yeah, it's cool. Interesting thing is it's the RST, and it's black, and my Equinox is a black RST. And it's interesting how GM and Chevrolet, I guess, uses a lot of the same bits. So when I'm sitting in there, it's like the same steering wheel, the same controls, the infotainment's the same. For a second, like when I look, I feel like I'm in my Equinox, but it's a totally different vehicle. But it's all the trim, the seats have the same type of stitching, the same colored stitching, because my Equinox is black RS and this is the black RST. So you could see what common parts they used. But yeah, I'll be doing a lot of content. Obviously, bunch of charging tests. Well, actually, probably not a bunch of charging tests because it's got such a big battery. For me to do the charging tests, I have to run the battery down to start at 10% or 20%. 212 kilowatt hour battery pack is not easy to run down. So, I'll be doing a range test for sure. I just have to really figure out when. I'm struggling with that because we're going to get rain here almost the entire next week. And this has got such a huge battery. It's going to have such good range. I'm expecting to go more than 400 miles at 70 miles an hour. So now you're talking about, a 7-hour, 8-hour drive, even longer when I have to DC fast charge it before, DC fast charge it after. So I'm really trying to figure out, this might just be whenever I can get a block of 8 or 9 hours without it raining. It might be midnight to 8 in the morning. I'm going to have to do it then. So I'm calculating that out now. And of course, charge tests and stuff like that. So I'm excited. Hopefully some comparisons between the Lightning and the Silverado. But again, I'm kind of up against it with the weather. If it rains every day, I can't stand outside and say, look at how the midgate works on the Silverado compared to what my truck is. So I'm worried about weather this week, unfortunately. But that's what happens when you get these loans. You only get them for the time they give you them, and you have to make the best of it. I see Nathan's telling me to go north, Tom. I-87 isn't bad towards Albany. Yeah, but it's not good courses up there for range tests, Nathan. There's a lot of elevation change, which I don't like to have when I do my range tests. It's not fair to the vehicle to do that.
Help me. I try and keep on top of the US specs and things like that, as well as everything happening in Europe and China as well. So RST, I think stands for, is it Rally Sport Truck? And then where does RST sit in the whole? I get the WT thing means work truck, and if you see WT, that's probably going to be the cheaper one. But in terms of how they do their specs, where does RST sit in the various lineup of the initials they use?
Top.
Okay, right, okay.
All the way up. So, and I have the I don't have the platinum Lightning. So I don't have the top trim of a Lightning to really compare like the top to the top. You know what I mean? So that's not a perfect comparison, but I would like to, if I can get some good weather, enough hours, I'd like to park them next to each other and just walk back and forth and say, this is what you have with this truck and this is what you have with this truck. But it's the weather is going to be bad here the next week. It's just like not heavy storms, but just like constant on and off rain. So we'll see what I could get done. But range and charging, 100%. I don't know how I'll do it, but I will do it. I hope I'm not doing a range test in the rain, but if I have no other choice, I will. But I'll talk about that and factor it in.
See some of those Silverados are being sold off by, is it Hertz, who maybe one of the US rental companies had bought a bunch of them and are sort of backing away from EVs a little bit. Talking of trims, you and I were mentioning that you've been making a super nerd video for Equinox fans. When's that coming out and what's that all about?
Yeah, probably today. So I did have a Equinox 2LT on loan from Chevrolet. I leased the 2RS, which is the Rally Sport Equinox, and Chevrolet gave me the 2LT so I could do like a comparison. And I have that video coming up today where I compare. It's basically it's $1,500 more to get the R2RS than it is to get the 2LT. So I go over everything you get for the $1,500. If you remember when I first leased the Equinox, I put out, some posts on X saying, hey guys, what would you like to see me do with my new Equinox? I have it for 2 years, so we could do a lot of Equinox content. And there's a lot of excitement about this car because it's a lower cost, vehicle that has really good range, kind of a good family car. It's in that spot that it seems like in the US, at least, Martin, is an incredibly popular size of a vehicle, which, we're going to talk about a little bit later with what you alluded to earlier. It seems like everybody's buying that size vehicle, that type of vehicle. So I had a bunch of people ask me, hey, Tom, I really want to get one, but I'm not sure if I should get the 2LT or the 2RS. Could you tell me what I'm getting for that? Of course, you could look it up online, but it's much nicer when somebody's standing there saying, look at what this looks like. Look at what this looks like. This is what you get with this one. This is what you get with this one. So I did a video with that comparing everything, and that's probably going to go up today. And you'll see. Then if you're thinking about getting the Equinox, that'll help you decide which one you want to get. Now, unfortunately, this is only for the 2024s. The 2025s are going to start shipping soon. And they have, GM's totally changed the trim levels. There's not a LS, an LT, an RS, a 2LT, a 3LT, a 2L. I never liked that. I thought it was too confusing. I like giving people options, but it was too much options and too confusing. You don't want to have to make people think about which one is on which vehicle. So they're streamlined it, and now it's either the LT or the RS with a bunch of options. I think that's a much better way of doing it. So I'm probably going to have to make another video next year and talk about the difference between the LT and the RS and what options you get. But for now, if you're looking at a 2024, this should help you decide which one you'd rather lease or buy.
Thank you to Nathan Green, who has helped me out. And for our audio listeners, I put it on screen. So LS is the low trim, LT is the mid trim, LTZ is top trim, RS Rally Sport, then RST Rally Sport Truck, we think, is the top trim at the very top, at least for now. So thank you very much, Nathan, for helping me understand.
And Martin, let me grab one more thing that Nathan just asked. Any idea of the range difference between the 19 LT and the 21-inch wheels? So I talked about this when I did the range test of my Equinox 2 RS with the 21-inch wheels. They're both EPA range rated at 319 miles per charge. I'm sure there's got to be some sort of a range penalty with getting the taller, wider, because they're not just bigger wheels. They're also a lot wider. They're 275/40 R21 tires on the RS, and on the LT they're 245/55s. I think it's 245/55s. But visibly, if you line them up, you can see the RSs are definitely wider. But there's no difference in the EPA range rating. So I'm not sure exactly how this works. I know if it's a significant difference, the EPA wants the manufacturer to send the documents to show what the difference is in range in the tires. That's why we see some electric vehicles, some cars have different range ratings with different tire setups. Since GM didn't have to do that, or the EPA didn't make them do that, I'm assuming it's not a big difference. So, maybe if you did them in a perfectly controlled environment, you'd get 319 for one of them. And let's say that was for the RS, and actually they probably certified what they got for the LT, because it would be slightly more. And maybe the RS penalty might be, I would say it would have to be less than 10 miles for the EPA not to make them say, look, there's a significant difference here with the tires. You need to give us a new, range rating on that. So, but yeah, as Nebula said, they usually make the manufacturer give them or certify the most popular way the vehicle will be sold, the most popular trim level, or with the way that most of those vehicles will be sold. But then they do, if there's a significant range difference, like you look at the Rivians, the difference between the all-terrain tires and the street tire, the all-season tires, it's huge. It's like 45 miles or something like that. They had to certify different numbers. So in any event, I don't know, Nathan, what the range penalty would be. I would say maybe 10 miles. I don't think it would be much more than that.
Interesting. All right. And looking forward to seeing that content coming out from you. Keep an eye on the State of Charge YouTube channel. Make sure you're subscribed. 100,000 people are to that. And of course, you can always read what Tom writes at InsideEVs.com as well. Look, we should probably get into talking about our main topic today, which is the proposed ban on Chinese tech inside EVs. Now, this is really interesting that it's actually on, automotive, and it's on generally on cars, but it obviously linked to EVs, like this Australian article that I'll pop on screen for our audience who are watching the show. The headline, I'll read it for the audio listeners: could be compromised, calls to ban weaponized Chinese EVs. Actually, what happened was nothing to do with EVs. It was to do with any modern vehicle, whether powered by gasoline or electricity. And the fact that these new cars often come equipped with internet-connected devices that make them vulnerable to cyber attacks. Their upcoming restrictions, as a result of an investigation started by President Biden in March, aimed at assessing cybersecurity threats posed by Chinese software in vehicles of any kind, but obviously EVs mostly are connected vehicles. Not all are, by the way. There are some dumb EVs. They can be very good EVs as well. I'm not being insulting to them, but generally EVs tend to be connected cars, and that's why the headline was obviously linked to that. The Biden administration's objective was to prevent any unauthorized tracking of vehicles. Regulations are obviously protectionist. Many new cars incorporate connected technology, things like GPS, locking and unlocking, even starting and even controlling a vehicle. And so what has... I can bring some more details into this discussion as we go on, but we'll just kick off this conversation. This new ban that's coming in two phases, a software ban and a hardware ban, could restrict Chinese involvement in the US automotive market if they rely on any of these systems. Now, back in May, of course, the US put a 100% tariff on Chinese EVs, but they weren't done with that. And actually, I'll get onto what I think of this in a minute after. I want to hear what Tom thinks. But I think this activity this week is going to have a much bigger effect than just slapping a tariff on. Because as we saw with Lotus, who added 100% onto their vehicle, they just came out with a really special edition of the Lotus Emea, full of carbon fiber, which wouldn't have cost them a huge amount to add, and said, look, our customers aren't that price sensitive. They are, but they're not that, they're a bit more elastic. And so here's a really special edition for the US, but it's going to cost you 200 grand and, double what it was. And they know their customers at Lotus. Whereas this, banning any Chinese involvement in hardware or software, it's a really big move. Like I said, I'll bring some more details in a minute. I'll go straight to Tom for what was your reaction when you heard this? You might be on mute, mate.
Not completely surprised, to be honest with you. Yeah, really? I really wasn't completely surprised because I think we've just seen the beginning of what is going to develop into a full-blown trade war on the automotive sector. And, I'm typically not somebody that wants protectionism and mostly free trade, but it has to be relatively fair. And, what we're seeing in China now and how the Chinese government wants to dominate the automobile sector and what they're offering their companies, like with subsidies and factories being built for them for like basically no money down and just pay us off over time, and giving them extraordinarily large swaths of land to build their own factories. And, it's different. It's not just doing that for these private companies. They're in a sense government entities, even though they're masked to not be. And, don't forget, China fired the first shot in this war, sort of. They banned Tesla vehicles from parking near any government building or driving on certain roads where government activities were going on. So that was kind of like the first shot. Now they pulled back some of those bans, I think, in China, but they definitely kind of started this by saying, hey, wait, these Tesla vehicles could be monitoring our goings on here on government buildings and military installations and so forth. And I think that's kind of what we're worried about here also, that the Chinese tech that gets put in some vehicles that are here in the US, and self-driving systems that are LiDAR systems that are mapping out roads and viewing everything in the air, that data could be going back to China and being used by their military. So it's not just an economic issue here where we want to build these components here and we don't want to cede the entire industry to China. There's also some security issues involved here that are legitimate. This is not a cut and dry. Now, everybody likes to solve problems with a simple, no, that's wrong. We have to go for free market. Everything's not black and white as much as I think a lot of people like it to be. There's a lot of gray areas, and this is a difficult area. In addition to the fact that I do certainly believe if we were to just roll with 100% free trade, I believe the Chinese automobile industry would put the rest of the world's automobile industry out of business in 15 to 20 years. And I mean everyone: Chevrolet, Ford, Volkswagen Group, Mercedes-Benz. I literally think in 20, 25 years, they're gone. If we just let them just completely flood the market with high-tech, low-cost vehicles.
I agree, because people will ultimately operate in their own self-interest. And, great examples of that are, we all want the best for our community and the culture, right? But ultimately, if you can save some money and put more money in your pocket by making a certain decision, ultimately feeding your family, then you will. I will die on this hill. I had this fight many times. You will do what is right for you, and if that means buying a great vehicle at the right price, half the price of an American-made vehicle, you can have all the flag waving you want. You'll do it. And people go, no, not at all. I meet people that drive British cars. They're like, oh, I'm driving it because it's British. And obviously, the patriotism in the US on a different league to pretty much anywhere else. But certainly from over here, where we're a little bit more stuffy, you don't really wave the flag unless you're a certain type of person. In the US, every house has got one hanging outside. And so you can say, no, I'm behind my country. But all of a sudden, you start saving some money and driving a pretty decent vehicle that might be a Western name, but was made in China. So I'm driving a Polestar, I'm driving a Volvo. That's Swedish, right? Well, no, that was made in China. I'm driving a Lotus. Oh, that's from Hethel in Norfolk, right? No, that's Chinese. And so it takes Chinese to buy a couple of famous American nameplates. Well, of course, GM is operating in China. Everyone is. But all of a sudden, I'm buying a GM vehicle. Yeah, but it was made in China. People won't go, oh, no, I'm only buying the one that, that was made on US soil. So I think you've got to intervene a little bit. Actually, maybe a lot. I'll pop this on screen, actually, because I was reminded of this. It was a piece of news this week. This is for our audio listeners. Nikkei Asia website. CATL took something like 3.9 billion yuan of incentives from the Chinese government in the first 6 months of this year. And many of our audience will know CATL as the number one. Oh, so that's, by the way, $600 million US. So many of our audience will know CATL as the world's biggest battery maker for electric vehicles. No, it's not even close. In China, they've got a massive, BYD are chasing, but it's not even, globally, it's CATL and then everybody else. So they're the biggest. They're the ones that can stand on their own 2 feet the most. They took, over $500 million US equivalent in subsidies in the first 6 months of the year alone, according to this report. Like, they don't need that. So the Chinese government aren't messing, as Tom says.
They do need it, Martin. They need it to be able to sell their batteries at a cost that nobody else could.
That's
and
true.
Crush the competition. That's why they're taking in that money, and it's working. They're crushing everybody. So, this is real. This is happening. And, if everybody continues, US, Europe, if everybody continues to allow it and just say, hey, I want that EV to cost $5,000 less. I don't care who makes the damn battery, because I want a long range EV that charges quickly. And this car here is $5,000 less. If that's what you want, okay. But understand, it might take a decade or two, but China will crush everybody. There will be Chinese cars, and that is it.
Roger says you have to ask how much longer the Chinese can afford to produce at a loss. Forever, Roger. You know, they're so in the EV industry, the Chinese model has been, we'll open it up, we'll give everybody some help. Hundreds of EV companies, dozens that we never talk about on this podcast, or even generally, hundreds, and loads have gone to the wall. So the Chinese government said, you have at it and we'll all help you. There's local, regional, state level incentives for these car makers. A load of them didn't make it. So there's been a little bit of natural selection going on there, Roger. But then the Chinese government have now picked their runners and riders and gone, right, well, we'll help these ones now. And these are the ones that can take it. And so I've got a couple of points to raise for the audience. I'd really love to see, actually Nebula. There you go. I think you wrote this as I was saying it. There's a Chinese EV startup bubble. Right now, there are too many EV companies in China. Yeah, loads of them are gone. And there's still too many. You're absolutely right. 100%. You said it better than me. So the recent Biden ban on Chinese tech particularly affects EVs. I mentioned gas cars, but EVs are connected cars. And particularly one big EV company in the US who could really be affected by this. And I'll pop that on screen right now. And there's a picture of Elon Musk. The biggest loser in Biden's Chinese car ban could well be Tesla. So the US Secretary of Commerce is Gina Raimondo, highlighting the dangers of any foreign entity controlling American vehicles remotely. Cameras, microphones, GPS, anything like that. If a foreign entity becomes a foreign adversary, then there's a great risk to this. So the ban is going to take part in two ways. Firstly, it's new models, so they're model years. So it's model year 2027 and model year 2030. So model year 2027 is software. Model year 2030 is going to be hardware, specifically any microchip that can transmit data, location, traffic update, talking to other cars, anything that would operate self-driving technology, banned. Vehicles using Chinese tech for keyless entry, banned. And so if that's software, then that would be 2027, which is a blink of an eye in automotive world. And yes, it targets Chinese interests. But just as we've seen with the EU tariffs on Chinese cars, bizarrely, and we won't get into that now, could really hurt the German car makers the most because they do business in China and they're not prepared for an all-out war. Actually, the one that could get hurt the most is Tesla, because Tesla was the first Western car company to be 100% owned by Tesla on Chinese soil. Now, they did it with Chinese money, as Tom says. They did it with Chinese loans. They got the land from China. But until then, if any Western car maker, until Tesla, wanted to operate in China, it had to be with a joint venture. And that was to facilitate. It wasn't covert. No one was hiding anything. It was to facilitate a transfer of knowledge from the Western car makers to the Chinese that knew nothing about building cars. Decent cars, not just crap. And it's worked over the last 2 decades. Because what's coming out of China now is really good. Like the cars, the materials, the connected services, the quality, the reliability. It is very good thanks to the Western car makers. But you could only do it at the most a 50-50 joint venture. It might have been 49-51. I don't know the exact way that those companies were split out. Tesla was the first one that was allowed to own their factory outright. And that was all about stealing, in an open way, transfer of knowledge from the Western car makers. Now it's gone the other way, because Ford did that deal with CATL to license CATL technology in the US. And so you had all the US politicians were like, hang on a minute, it's Chinese tech on US soil. And for the first time, this is why I don't think the deal's it may not get across the line. Somebody from Ford can tell me I'm wrong. Is because China went, no, that's our technology. That's our IP. You're not building batteries on US soil with that. No. And so they didn't say no. They went, well, this deal raises a lot of concerns. Ultimately, if they put the call into CATL, who we've established already 5 minutes ago, are getting a ton of subsidies, almost swore then, a ton of subsidies. What are they going to say? No, thank you, Mr. Xi. I think we're going to go ahead with this deal in America. Or you're absolutely right. We won't transfer that knowledge back to US soil now that we've taken advantage. Of course. So that was my take on it, was how the tables have turned. And I think they have a degree of control. They'll exert all of that soft power they can. But what I don't know, Tom, and neither you or I make cars for a living, the idea of getting rid of anything that's been through China, though, Tom, a microcontroller that might control your electric car seat, but could also potentially transmit data, I don't know. Any software line of code that's been through China, or a subcontractor, you get some cheap Chinese labor to write the code, tens of thousands of lines of code. Like, how on earth are you going to remove China from the automobile industry in the US in 2 or 3 years? I understand that. Have you thought about that at all?
Yeah, I don't think we will. I think, first of all, this is just a proposal at this point, right? I'm pretty sure.
Yes.
I think it was, it's one of those things where you throw down you lay down the gauntlet, and then now it's, there's going to be a lot of lobbying, Ford, General Motors, everyone's going to, reach out to the Biden administration. We're going to have a new president elected in a little more than a month. That the new administration's going to be negotiating. So, I don't think that this was proposed with the understanding or the intent that, okay, this is going to go through this way on this timeline. They'll be negotiating. But I do like the fact that it's bringing this to light. And now we're going to have a conversation on it. The lawmakers I'm sure they got their calls from lobbyists from China and the U.S. companies saying this is unworkable. We could never do this. The timeline you're laying out, we're going to have to, our cars are going to get dumber in the next 2 years if all these bans come into effect this quickly. You're going to start seeing cars that are less technologically advanced in 2 years than the cars we're selling now, because we can't have some of this software and hardware developed in that timeline and, validated, from a non-Chinese entity and supply it to us in the volume that we need. So, I don't think that this is okay. This is how it's going to go down, Martin. But I like the fact that they looked at the initial tariff, the 100% tariff, and kind of said, is this enough? Like, did we miss something? And then, and they're like, yeah, it's not just the cars, it's the components. Like, you can have a car made here in the US, but if the components is like, if there's spyware built into the components, if it's sending signals back to China, that's just as bad as having a Chinese car here. If they're mapping out, some of the cars that'll be driven are like, on U.S. military bases and so forth, and they'll be driving around and parking in highly secure areas, and somebody over in Beijing can turn on the camera and just watch what's going on and listen. Who knows them? We just saw what happened, with Israel, planting bombs in pagers. What if the tech I'm sure it's even available now, where like the Chinese military could put hidden stuff inside the cars and tech, and the cars can blow up on people. Yeah. So, I'm not suggesting China would do that right now, but it's just, it's good that this is coming to light and saying, hey, wait a minute, technology is advancing so quickly. Are we opening up, are we allowing the Trojan horses to just roll across constantly and get in the country where in 5 or 6 years, it'll be too late to stop it. They'll be here, they'll be everywhere. So yeah. I think we need to have a conversation about this now.
Well, the administration has a 30-day public comment period on the proposal, and they would add to the existing set of restrictions, of course, that target Chinese cars that are already in place. Now, as I said, I don't work in the car making industry, but the Alliance for Automotive Innovation does represent major companies like Ford and GM, and they said they support this security, in national security move by eliminating China and countries of concern. Now, John Bozella is the president of the group, and he said this, and I quote, "There's actually very little technology, hardware or software, in today's connected vehicle supply chain that enters the US from China, but this rule will require auto manufacturers in some cases to find alternate suppliers," end quote. So there's someone who knows what they're talking about saying there's not that much Chinese stuff in EVs. So I'll defer to him. I just have this gut feeling that there has to be when you scratch the surface, an absolute nightmare, a rat's nest underneath this, because we saw this with the federal $7,500 tax credit for making the vehicle on US soil, and also the battery having all the right components. And so many companies were a long time coming to us with, hey, will your vehicles get the, when this was first announced, the full tax credit? They're like, well, we're working out the supply chain for our battery, because we just don't know, we have all the answers, because there's something that was in China. Like, we haven't had to ask this question yet. We'll get back to you. And then some of them took a really long time to confirm whether they would meet the 3,750, half of the $7,500. And that was a long process. So yeah, I mean, obviously it can be done, but I do think, though, we need government to do this. When I talk to my listeners or AV News Daily, my podcast, about this, there are a couple of points. Firstly, I own an MG, I own a Polestar. They're Chinese companies, SAIC and Geely, made in China. And I say on my podcast, I don't lose sleep over if the Chinese want to turn on the front-facing camera on my car and look at my driveway. I can't worry about that on a personal level. It doesn't keep me awake at night. It doesn't mean I like it. I just don't care about it. And then some listeners got very upset about that. They're like, oh, you're supporting, this move to destroy, the German car industry, the US car industry. I'm genuinely not. It's just, I don't think it's down to individual responsibility. I do think it goes higher than that. And I do think that governments, things like the European Union, and at that level of lawmaking, need to get involved. I liken it, to my listeners, Tom, to the food supply chain. Like, you go out and you buy organic, grass-fed, outdoor reared, a great piece of steak. You trust what's on the packet, because there must be some rules in the food supply chain that it is. Because you can't go and visit every time you go to the supermarket, ask them where that right. And you can go to farmers markets, but you don't. You go to the supermarket, you go, right, what farm did this come from? Okay, I'm going to jump in the car, go down there, meet the farmer, and ask if it is, pasture-red, grass-fed, steak. You don't do it, because you need, at some point, for the big lawmakers to come in and regulate these things. The same with pharmaceuticals and all that. You can't have an individual responsibility for this. And lots of people on my podcast, some people, I should say, had some pushback saying, no, it's up to the individual to buy American, to buy British, to buy, European. And I'm like, okay, but what phone are you typing that email on? Like, was that made in China? I don't know. I'm not trying to pick a fight. People pick and choose their battles, and they get the car industry has a lot of high emotion around it, but it's really difficult. So yeah, that's all I had to say.
Bobby Faison brings up a really good point, and kind of along what you just said. We're already inundated. Inundated, Jesus, with Chinese tech. All of our TVs, phones, headphones, watches, computers are manufactured there. And he's right. Google and Amazon do the same surveillance, but we're not banning those. It's a good point, Bobby. Are the horses out of the barn? Are we picking on just one industry, singling out the one industry and letting everything go because, well, we've already lost those industries. We're not making cell phones or computers here, but we still are making cars here. And can we try to save that? I don't know. That's a really good point there, Bobby. I've said on the podcast before many times that I don't think we can stop Chinese vehicles from dominating at this point. And I still believe that unless, something like this went through. And do I believe it's the right thing? I'm not saying I believe it's the right thing to ban their tech. What I do think it's the right thing is to have a conversation on it, to bring it up and say, okay, are we doing the right thing here? How do we proceed? What's the best way for national security, whether it's economic or military? What's the best for our country at this point? Maybe it is to just say, you know what? They're already here. Let's just do the best we can and let it continue. I don't know, but I like the fact that we're having a conversation about it, that at least some people are starting to look at it and say, wait a minute, before we go one way or another, what's the best path forward for us?
Absolutely. It's a really complicated issue. And I love we've had this conversation today. And the audience, I mean, you chip in the comments. And again, our audio listeners can't always see the ones I'm flashing up on screen and Tom's putting up on screen. But it's a fascinating conversation to have because, largely the people who tune into this podcast, you're a sensible lot and you're an intelligent lot. And you're making some fantastic comments. So thank you very much. I really appreciate everything that you're chipping in with that. The conversation continues, like I say, in a public consultation, period. Now, we should get somebody on from the car industry to talk about this. They might not want to yet because it's pretty fraught with politics. But there we go.
It's hard to get people from the OEMs to come on and talk about this stuff, where the government's involved and everything. It's difficult for them to really be open and honest in a public forum at this point. So
yeah, I remember
I've had people tell me things off the record, but like they wouldn't, come on live and really discuss it. Not when we had my contacts, at least.
Yeah, when we had Darren Palmer come on, I don't know his latest job title. He's VP of electric vehicles. Yeah, VP of electric vehicles at Ford. Right at the very end of the last time Darren came on with us, I thought I'll throw this bomb in because he knows I mean it very respectfully, and I was pretty sure of the answer he would give. And I was like, how difficult is it running a department with all the budget responsibilities that you've got and employees and pensions and the duty of care of a big staff that he has at Ford? And then there's election on the horizon. And one of the candidates, which I think at the time was Biden, was like, yay, EVs. And Trump is like, 200% tariff on anything made in Mexico to stop the Chinese companies coming in via Mexico, which could be a good idea, by the way. And I said, how difficult is it for you when politicians can sort of change with the wind and you need to make plans on a 5 and 10 year scale? And he sort of went, yep, I can't answer that question, but it's very difficult, and sort of gave a knowing smile. And we moved on. I wasn't asking him to, compromise himself, because whoever wins in November, the world could be a very different place, and you just got to roll with the punches. You don't want to upset somebody if they're gonna win. We should probably move on. We'll take a break. For our audio listeners, we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, there's loads more to discuss in the podcast today. Thank you so much for tuning in, as always. All right, welcome back to our audio listeners. And if you're watching online on YouTube, on Twitch and Facebook and X Twitter, please make sure that you do all the things like, like the show, subscribe to the channel, give us a thumbs up, the heart button, all those things really help the algorithm recommend us to other people when we're all back together in future weeks. Now, Tom, this is a huge bit of news in terms of where we can charge our cars, because Kia announced this week that they will be turning on the supercharger access on a very specific day, January 15th. They gave not just January, not just Q1. No one's done that, right?
We haven't seen that before. It's been
17,000 supercharger stations joining Ford, Rivian, and GM being able to use the Tesla superchargers.
And you know what also is interesting? You just mentioned like the almost 17,000. Every automaker that's gotten access to Tesla superchargers has given a different number.
Yeah, I know. I saw that.
Like, and it's not always more. You would think it's always more because Tesla keeps installing more superchargers. That's not the case. It's like, one automaker said 17,800. I think someone said 18,000, now 15,800, something like that. It's like, I don't get it.
I know it's V3s and above, but what is that exact number? So,
It's weird. It's weird that they're giving us a specific date. I love it. It's great. We could talk about it. We know when it's coming. None of the other automakers did that. I was lucky enough to have early access to General Motors, Ford, and Rivian. So I kind of knew ahead of time when it was going to be launched. But here now, I don't have anybody everybody knows Kia's the 15th of January. So I won't be doing any special early access videos, I don't think, unless Kia turns on a supercharger early for me like GM just did. But that's all that's all great, but I love having that. And I've been reaching out to all of the automakers over the last 6-7 months. That's part of the reason why I got early access to GM, because they were tired of me sending them emails saying, you got to let me do this. You got to let me do this every week. But I reach out to all the automakers saying, when are you going to have access? When are you going to have access? this is I guess I could stop emailing Kia and asking them. But now I'm curious about Hyundai, because a Hyundai has to get access before Kia.
Why? Why couldn't Kia be first?
Well, Hyundai announced that when the refreshed, I guess Ioniq 5 comes out, it's going to have a NACS port, native NACS port, and they said at its launch we'll have supercharger access, and that's coming out this year, which is before the 15th of January. So that's I haven't gotten any information on this. I asked Hyundai a few times, does this mean, can you give me a date? Can you give me access? Blah, blah, blah. Get nothing back from them. So it's got to be sometime before January 15th. Guys, that's only 3 months. So Hyundai should be getting access pretty soon.
I wonder why. I mean, is there any benefit to them doing it separately, or should just Hyundai, Kia, Genesis all go on the same day? I guess they're all brands, aren't they? So yeah,
and they're separate companies. I bet you they have separate software and charging departments working with Tesla. I bet that's the case. I'm pretty sure that's, General Motors kind of took the overall lead working with Tesla, but the individual companies also got involved with, making sure their specific vehicles all work fine. Maybe you're right. Maybe it will be the same date, but then that goes against what Hyundai said. They said when the vehicle launches, when it's here when customers are driving it, it'll have access to the supercharger, unless I misread their statement. I'm pretty sure that's what they said.
Our audience are the best. Bill says, today in the US, there are 17,366 V3 and above superchargers in the Tesla network, over 60% of the Tesla network. Thank you very much, Bill. You legend. Appreciate that. Now we have a number to put on all future press releases.
And you can take Bill's comment to the bank. Bill knows, trust me.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I've known Bill from back in the Active E days. Bill was in the BMW Active E program with me, and he's very involved currently with gathering data about chargers.
Wow.
So I don't know how much he would want me to say, but he's very involved, and he has some awesome data, which I've been privy to view, and I'll be doing probably a video on what he's been working on soon.
Customers who purchased a EV6 or EV9, so 2024 model year or 25 model year, but the line in the sand is September 6th onwards. If it's September 6th onwards of this year, by the way, so a couple of weeks ago, you get a free adapter for the supercharger network, because those cars at the minute have CCS1. Deliveries of those will begin ahead of the 15th next year. Mm-hmm. If you got an EV6, 9 or Nero prior to that date, you have to purchase it. I can't think of any hardware reason. Like there was no new tech going in the car. This isn't simply a line in the sand, is it not? Which ones get it free and who has to buy the adapter, unless I've missed something?
For which company you're talking about?
Kia. So Kia said you buy your Kia after September 6th this year, we'll send you a free one. Yeah,
before you have to buy one.
Is that just an arbitrary date?
Yeah, they just picked the date.
Fair enough.
Yeah, it had to be some date.
Yeah, well, I guess it can't be every single Kia that's been sold in the EV.
It could have been.
It could have been.
It could have. Well, probably. I mean, you could have said that, but I'm not necessarily. I don't necessarily believe that they need to give them away for free. As I said, I'm firm believer. Whatever's free gets abused. I understand why they're doing it. I understand why companies offer free charging. It's an incentive. I just think that with the limited supply of them, and they're still in limited supply, even the third-party suppliers, it would be better to say, pay us $50.
Yeah.
Much less than what it costs, but just make a financial commitment. Now we know you want it. You know what I mean? So, but in any event, that's that's neither here nor there. But yeah, September 6th or the 4th, one of those days is the date. If you have a Kia vehicle before that and you want to have supercharger access on January 15th and forward, you have to buy one. And I will remind everyone that I do have a coupon code with both Lectron and A to Z. The Lectron coupon code is going to expire pretty soon. The A to Z won't. 15% off bringing the price of both of those adapters to $170. Full disclosure, I get an affiliate commission on that. It's small, but since I've sold thousands of them for both companies, it adds up. Full disclosure, but they're good products. I use them all the time. The thing is, both companies sent me multiple adapters, so I have 4 different EVs that all have supercharger access. So I have them in all the vehicles. I don't even use the official Tesla adapter. I keep that in the garage to use in videos and stuff. So whenever any of my EVs charge right now, it's either using the A to Z or the Electron adapter. So, and the Electron adapter actually is one of the official approved adapters by General Motors. They never really came out and announced it, but that is one of the adapters that they ship out. So, it's interesting that that was one of the adapters they shipped out. Why wasn't the A to Z adapter one of the ones that was approved by GM or officially endorsed, let's say? My belief is that, if you remember, they updated the adapter recently. The initial adapter had a manual switch on the bottom, which I criticized in my review. I didn't like it. And that would go against potential UL certification. It has to be an automatic lock to unlock and lock it. So what they did was they redesigned it. And now we have this Typhoon Pro, which has an automatic, when you snap it in, it locks to the vehicle. You don't have to press anything. And I think that's why they were looking at the first generation one and saying, I don't like that there's a manual lock, because engineering wise, and I've gotten engineering reports from these companies that A to Z ran their adapter at, 500 amps for 48 hours continuously, monitoring temperatures and everything. Nothing even made a temperature derate or shut off happen. So both of these adapters, I'm 100% confident that you can use. So, if you do want to have access and you bought your Kia before September 6th, you might want to get one ahead of time, throw it in the glove box, and because the prices won't go down. If anything, they're going to go up as more and more companies get involved with this, and supply gets even more choked.
Yeah, the upcoming refreshed EV6 will be the first Kia EV sold in the US with native NACS, or J3400, as we probably should call it, natively on the side of the vehicle, a bit like the new Ioniq 5, although the weird thing is with the Ioniq 5, I think it's made in Bryan County, Georgia. They said that the first ones off the production line this quarter will have CCS1, and then they'll switch over, and there's obviously a reason for that. I don't know. Why not just wait? But it doesn't matter, because we're going to be living in connector hell adapter hell for the next 5 years at least anyway. And then the Kia EV9 will be next as well. So January 15th rolls around. You can use the Kia Access app after the software update is done to your car over the air, and then or you can use the Tesla app, of course, to initiate a charge. And Kia will give you a choice of 3 adapters because they need one adapter, which will be for CCS1 to use the Tesla to CCS1. There'll be the other one to go the other way around, and they're going to offer a level 2, non-Tesla level 2, so J1772 to NACS. So if you've got a J1772 in your garage, or just you use destination charging, and Kia's got native NACS, they're going to offer it, whether that's free or for a cost. I don't know. That wasn't in the press release. So, yeah, we're going to live in adapter hell for such a long time. Wait, no, I'm not. You are. We've got CCS2, and we're sticking with it.
Yeah. It's going to be an issue for a while, but it's really not difficult. You just get the AC and the DC adapter, you leave it in your car, and you're good to go. No matter where you show up, you're either going to plug into your native inlet, or you pop the adapter on. It's real easy. It's you just have to understand. The people that are new to EVs have to understand not all plugs are the same. So you get the right 1 or 2 adapters that you need for your vehicle. You keep them in the car. Don't take them out. You're good to go. Now,
let's talk about a couple more topics, because we didn't know if we were going to have enough for at least an hour with just the 2 of us and you guys in the comments, but we're motoring today. I will take a break to bring up Mark Norman's comment. Thank you, Mark, for your contribution to the show. Pays for the little bits and bobs, the hosting fees and stuff like that. Everything is always appreciated anytime you contribute, to batteries included. Mark's chipped in $5. Thank you, my friend. Anyone have a scoop on the Rivian event in October? I don't, but I wouldn't be invited because I'm a couple of thousand miles away.
I believe it or not, I think I got an email on this, but I haven't even read it yet. But if I did, I probably couldn't talk about it. So, that's one of the things about scoops, Mark. When the automakers send us stuff, we have to keep it to ourselves or we don't get anything else.
Yeah,
and the cool thing about batteries included is I know for a fact that all the automakers watch the show. We've got eyes on the show every week from most of the major automakers, because sometimes if I say something that's not correct or something they don't like, right after the show, I get a call or an email. Hey, we were listening to the show and you said this, that's not exactly correct or whatever. So they all have eyes on this. So if I were to slip up even once and say something that I wasn't supposed to, I'm telling you, you will get punished. You won't get information flowing your way after that. So sorry, Mark.
Absolutely. So, and while we're talking about invites, it's not much more to say about it, but invites went out this week into the inboxes of those that get these things to the Tesla event, which is their autonomy event, not called iRobot, but We, comma robot, is the name of their event, which I thought was nice. And those invites went out this week. But again, if you turn up, you've been misbehaving, then Tesla, it won't be the first time they've turned people away from their event, or just no, we can't find you. We'd sent you the invite, but you're not coming in. So these things are always pretty well guarded. Any kind of new launches and things like that. Anything to say on Rivian? Sorry, Tom, you carry on.
So Mark just pulled up. Mark writes that any information from the charge point operators on starting to provide NACS connectors. So, Mark, you know how it works with ChargePoint. The operators are all individual companies. It's not like an EVgo network or Electrify America network where we can contact that network and say, when are you going to start putting these on? ChargePoint is, there's thousands of different ChargePoint operators. I was a ChargePoint operator when I owned a commercial property in Montclair, New Jersey. I had a ChargePoint DC fast charger and a level 2 charger, and it was up to me to update the cables. So we really wouldn't get any information on that. Like I would imagine some operators are going to start installing them, but even ChargePoint themselves, they would only know if they're getting orders from their individual property managers and owners saying, yeah, they want us to come out and swap out a cable. I actually have a replacement cable here in the garage. I was going to do a video on it. I haven't done it yet, where their level 2 chargers can be updated with the cable and the J3400. So I have one sitting here in a box that I'm going to do a video on sooner or later. But they're ready. The cables are ready. If a ChargePoint operator wants to update their equipment, ChargePoint will either sell them the cable or send a service company out to swap it for them. As for the other big companies, I don't really have anything new on when they're going to start doing it. There's no reason to start doing it now, as far as I'm concerned, because there's no cars that they can service. There's Tesla vehicles, but Tesla's vehicles that have wanted to use NACS charge on the other networks or have already bought the connectors, so the adapters. So I don't see a big reason why for them to rush to install them. What I would do if I was managing a network probably was start to swap them as cables and connectors on my network broke. So when one, most all the chargers have two connectors and 2 cables. If one of them, the connector got smashed on the ground or the cable, there's a problem with it, I'd go out and swap it with an NACS. Certainly not both, and certainly not a big percentage of my station. So like, let's say if I'm Electrify America and I have an 8-station site, I wouldn't put more than 2 NACS connectors, out of the 16 that are there at this point, because it's going to be a gradual transition. And, we're only going to get the first cars with them in a couple of months that are outside of the Tesla network. So that's how I would do it, but we'll see how other companies do it. I made, and maybe we could talk about next, I put out the video on the Alpatronics new chargers that are going to be installed here in the U.S. I went down. Kyle actually went with me. Brendan Flash, you guys might know him. He's in the comment section here live, very active on social media. He worked for Alpatronics. He invited us down. They opened up their new U.S. headquarters down in North Carolina, and they're going to be selling charging equipment. Alpatronics has very reliable, very efficient, high-speed chargers. They go up to 400 kilowatts. And Mercedes recently announced that they're going to be installing the Alpatronics 400 kilowatt chargers on the new Mercedes network. There's going to be a couple announcements from other companies soon that are going to be using them. And, they offer a NACS connector. A lot of people ask me in my video, Tom, what about NACS? Because I really didn't show too much NACS. I just had one short clip of a NACS connector on an Alpatronic charger. They're available. Whoever Alpatronic is going to supply the equipment like ChargePoint does. The network is going to buy it. They'll decide how many NACS connectors go on the charging equipment on their sites. It's not up to the equipment manufacturer to decide, but they can build them with 2 NACS connectors, with 1, none, however the customer wants it. You'll be able to order it and do it that way. But I think we're going to see like a Mercedes and some of the other companies that we're going to hear soon announcing that they're using the Alpatronics equipment. I'm pretty sure you're going to see them have at least 1 or 2 NACS connector on every one of their sites.
That's interesting. And in the comments, people have been pointing out that some of them are just appearing in some places. It's going to be a nightmare, isn't it? Because if you turn up to a charger because you've got a CCS1 car and you've been using that one on a certain journey, certain route, and you are expecting to find a certain cable, so you haven't got an adapter in your boot or something, or in your frunk, and then you turn up and that cable was maybe damaged last week, so they thought, we'll take the chance to put a new J3400 one on it. And you're like, oh no, I can't use this one because you maybe didn't know about it. So there's going to be cases of that happening. You're going to have an adapter, or as you say, have sites where you have split cables. And then when you move that site over to J3400, you make a big deal out of saying to everybody, or somehow push notifications, hey, this charging site, it's now a NACS site.
Let me
that's
pull
crazy.
Up a comment here. So you guys know Pete. Pete's my friend. Pete did the race to me to Florida where we raced Kyle and Out-of-Spec Dave in the Lightnings. So Pete wanted to know, Tom, will the Mercedes charging network be open to everyone? So one of the reasons why I pulled this up is to I don't want to say embarrass, but to call out Pete here. Pete, what charger did we charge on in Florida?
Oh no,
it was a Mercedes charger on the Mercedes network. So think back a little bit. What was that big Mercedes emblem doing on the charger we used? So you've already charged on a Mercedes charger with a Ford vehicle. So yes, the Mercedes network will be open to everyone. It currently is. They already started installing it.
Now,
but the older stations that we charged on, they were not the Alpatronics. They're switching over to the Alpatronic chargers. That was a ChargePoint charger that we used.
Thank you so much to the EV Geek, who's contributed to the show today. Thank you so much. Sending us a sticker via YouTube. We really appreciate that. Thank you so much. We really, we couldn't do it without running a few ads on this. Sorry about that. We did get occasionally emails saying, you've got ads in your podcast. Yeah, sorry, we have to do that because there's certain bills that we have to pay to getting this on the air. And we will do our own things as well. Hey, we're going to get on to a hybrid motorhome. You'd call it an RV. In a minute, but we'll take a quick break for our audio listeners and be back in a sec. All right, so let's talk very quickly about this. There was an industry event this week, Tom. It was the Automotive News Congress. I think it's in Pontiac, Michigan, and Jim Farley was on stage. Big names in the car industry talking about the future of mobility. But I really found this one very interesting in terms of a discussion point for our Friday show that we do here, and that was the head of the Model E, the chief operating officer of Ford's Model E division. His name is Marin Jaya, and he was talking on stage about he has now come to realize that it's his job and Ford's job to be educators. And he noted that having the benefits of an EV, what Ford are finding is people don't get the benefits when you're talking about why you should go EV until you drive one. Although, actually, he said when you've had one for a period of time, I disagree with him on this, but maybe he was just Maybe it's a turn of phrase. I don't know. He noted that things like in-vehicle generators, so Ford ProPower on board him, and he would say that because it's a great brand that they've got there, and they do that with their EVs and transits, and all about utility. You can power devices, or even in an off-grid situation, well over, last time I looked this morning when I woke up, over 1 million people in your country have no power because of Helene, which, yeah, sure, it's been downgraded, but it's going to be a big cleanup. And, it almost hit Tallahassee, the eye of that storm, head on, and which is where Dom lives. Many of you know Dom's in Tallahassee, and he's on this road trip with Kyle. Obviously, his family are there at home, and they're all okay, and it missed. But so that would be very useful in these off-grid situations. And he also talked about how charging overnight makes travel so much cheaper off, and it's more convenient to charge at home. So many cost savings as well. What he said was, yes, we have a compliance requirement to sell electric vehicles, but out there we have customers who are fearing loss and misperceive the value. My job is to figure out how to sell and market a vehicle that people don't appreciate its value until they own it for 3 years. End quote. And so I thought it was really interesting, Tom. I thought I'd just bring it up today because Ford are one of those companies that have delayed their headlong rush into EV. I'm going, hang on a minute. We need to, this transition is going to be stickier than we thought. Maybe a few more plug-in hybrids. Let's work out the demand and things like that. But he specifically linked it to education, things like Ford University, which is an AI tool, digital training. But that's his whole job, is just to educate. It's what you do on State of Charge, what I do on EV News Daily, on a different level than what Ford have to do. And I was thinking, that's dealerships, isn't it? That's the general public. That's people who fear going EV. They're making big investments. They've got the team in California with the mid-size pickup coming in 2027. This new platform, a huge job they're doing. Of all the things that came out of that industry event this week, I thought that was really interesting. His whole job is education, which is, of course, what you do on State of Charge. But that's a massive job that all the car makers are taking on.
It is. And, you say taking on.
Are they not, though? Should they be doing it better?
That's the thing. And I can't put all the blame on the OEMs here, really. They all should be doing a better job, in my opinion. This is something that I've worked on for many years. For 3 or 4 years, I was, the architect and also the trainer, the head trainer for Plug-in America's Plug Star program, which was a dealership certification and training program. And I worked with hundreds of dealers across this country. And it's an enormous problem because getting the dealers to be able to properly convey the value of driving electric is not easy, and especially with the way the dealership industry is here in the U.S. There's extraordinarily high turnover. So even if you train somebody well and you have a good person, there's a good chance they might not be with that dealership in 6 months. You have to start over from scratch. And the dealers in this country, the dealership model has really evolved over the last 20 years or so. The low level, and I say low level because that is how they're treated, the floor people, the people on the floor actually selling the vehicles, are under such intense pressure, and they get such small commissions that they're incentivized to get a customer to sign the paper as fast as possible and move on to the next customer. It's the only way they can make money. You don't see typically lifelong salespeople like you used to back in the, I'm dating myself, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. It was a job. They were still looked upon as kind of like a little slimy car salesman, but it was a job. It was a legitimate job that, you could, raise a family on and work at a dealership for 30, 40 years and then retire. That's not the case anymore. All the money is getting funneled up to the top. The people on the bottom on the floor are getting peanuts. And that does not give them the incentive to learn their craft, to do a good job at it. And it's so much easier to sell a gas car because you don't have to explain things like kilowatt hour and kilowatts and cost to charge and where you charge and adapters and charge ports and the difference between, well, you can't use a supercharger, but you might be able to use a level 2 Tesla charger. It's complicated. So the dealers hold so much power in this country over the manufacturers that they can basically say, no, we don't want to learn this stuff. You could send us all you want. we're going to push the other cars because they're easier to sell. We're going to get them out of the door faster. Now, Ford actually tried to take on the dealership lobby. They tried. They really did. I was at the event in Las Vegas when they brought all their dealers together and said, guys, this is where we pivot. We have to pivot because Tesla and the other startups are going to crush us if we don't learn how to be better electric vehicle salespeople, and the dealers aren't prepared, and they can discuss charging. They'll have chargers. They'll have the right tools. If people don't ever want to go to the dealership, you have to offer a pickup and drop off service. You can order it through our main Ford website, and then you will deliver the car to their house. People don't want to go to dealerships anymore. So we're going to offer them the option. If they just want to one click buy and you deliver them the car, you're still delivering it. You're still getting the commission, and you'll still get service on it and everything. The dealers fought them so badly, beat them down so badly, had, lawsuits in every state, that Ford just buckled. And it's easy to say, well, Ford, they gave in too quickly. They have all the Ford board of directors, management, everything. They have stockholders, shareholders to answer to. And when you're getting sued in 20 states and you're losing tons of money on this, and even the vehicles themselves aren't highly profitable yet, they will be at some point. I can understand why they said, you know what, we just they won, and let's go back to the hybrids, and we're hemorrhaging cash, we're getting sued all over the place. This is a tough thing here, Martin, and the education is 100% the issue. It's very difficult to convey the value of driving electric if you don't have the right tools. If the salesperson doesn't know the value, how can he convey it? And the best way to know it is what the Ford rep said: drive one for a while. That's how you learn it. Yeah. Not getting even the Ford University thing, the online thing. I went on to that. I really wasn't impressed. I made a video on it and everything, and wrote an article on Inside EVs. I was actually at that. I got trained on that before it went live to their salespeople, and I had hoped it would be more than what I think it was. It's a good tool. It's a good resource. They're kind of gamifying it, like they're trying to make the salespeople want to go online and learn stuff, because you could get points, you could win stuff and everything. But the EV stuff was a little weak sauce on my opinion, at least.
Yeah, so. He also said at the end of his quote was, people don't appreciate the value until they've owned it for 3 years. And I suspect that if you nailed him down and said, how long have you got to own an EV? I think he was on stage, and so it was not a fireside chat, a one-on-one, the little thing with the two sofas and stuff on the stage. I think he was just chatting, and I think he was just trying to illustrate a point. I don't think he genuinely means you've got to own an EV for 3 years. After 36 months, I get it now, because I think you get it. Firstly, it comes in waves. Number one, you pull away and you're like, oh, this isn't witchcraft. It's just another way of powering a vehicle. And I think the first time you charge, you go, oh, it's not scary. Had to learn what a CCS was and a CHAdeMO and a level 2 and what are these. The minute you learn it, you're like, oh, right, I just plug it in. So it goes in waves. I think after owning an EV for about a week, maybe, you go, oh, okay, I'm never going back. Right. And maybe you are going to go back because it's a working vehicle and it doesn't work for you yet because you have a truck need or something. And you go, oh, I'm going to go back to diesel. And that's all okay, or hybrid. But I think for most people, it's not 3 years. I think he was just trying to illustrate his point. I don't think he means 3 years. But I disagree with that because So that's the job that he says he's got to do. And that's what I do on EV News Daily. It's what you do on State of Charge. It's interesting. Yeah, maybe the car companies could do a better job at it. Anyway, right. We will finish off because we could talk about a lot of stuff today. We'll finish off. And I thought, let's end with this because it's a bit of fun. And this is a 500-mile plug-in hybrid RV that was announced this week. Thor Industries is a top RV maker. They've teamed up with Harbinger Motors to make this Class A motorhome. It's the first one of its kind. It's a 140 kilowatt hour battery pack, and the gas engine is a range extender. So a total range of 500 miles, 800 kilometers, and it's built on a medium-duty electric chassis, designed for Thor by Harbinger, 800-volt system. And so it'll do about 150 miles on battery power alone, which is unlike anything else that's out there at the minute in terms of campers and RVs and things like that. It's got steer-by-wire technology, double wishbone front suspension, driver assistance, lots of high tech. But I think this is really interesting because it went down really well this week with, the internet, as it were. All the comments I saw were really positive about this, which is, yes, this is a great way of doing it. Okay, it's got a big battery, and yes, it'll go a long way on electric, but for your country where distances are so much bigger, it'd be no use here because we just sort of hop from campsite to campsite. But if you're doing big miles and elevation and stuff like that, there is no worries about saying, you know what, we need this transitional technology while energy density is improving to have this technology. And they also pointed out that, when it's sat outside your house, when you're not traveling, that it's perfect for doing vehicle to grid. You're going to have 140 kilowatt hours just sitting out there doing nothing, probably during the week when you're not camping, and using it for your house. And when you are camping, you can use it to charge your e-bikes and your induction hob and all that kind of stuff. So this is very, very cool. And end with something fun. I mean, there's no harm in this kind of technology that is a bit of combustion, a bit of battery stuff in these edge cases, because surely RVs is such an edge case, isn't it? But I thought this looked cool.
Yeah, I like it. And as you said, it is a transitional technology, but a necessary one at this point. It really doesn't, at least here in the US, Martin, it's not workable to have a fully electric RV, in my opinion, for most people.
I
Some
totally
people
agree.
obviously can make it work, but for many people, the point of the RV is to see America. I mean, I have friends that use them to drive coast to coast, and their annual family vacation is, okay, where are we going this year? And it covers thousands of miles of driving. So, if you have to spend half the time charging, that kind of puts a damper on it. We just don't have enough charging in the right places yet to really have a fully electric RV. So this is a good transitional type vehicle. It goes far enough, I think, that the fuel economy will be good because you'll be on battery a lot. Certainly not all the time. And when you're, going somewhere that's maybe, off the beaten path, maybe you could charge up at the last minute that you can, the last charger before you're going to really head to where there's not a lot of people. And now you've got this big battery to use for the week or so that you're there to draw on to, silently, set up your camp and cook and all the stuff. You won't have to have the engine running or whatever to power anything. So I like it. I think this is the type of RV that would make sense for the next, 5 years or so, maybe hopefully by the end of this decade. The battery technology will be at a point where, you could put a 400 kilowatt hour battery pack in here, and the battery itself will only cost 30 or 40,000. And there'll be charging stations all over the place so that, you could easily recharge it. But that's what it would take to make an RV in the US really be a workable vehicle that you can have the freedom that you want to go wherever you want to go. It'd have to have like a 400 kilowatt hour battery pack because these things are big and heavy and aren't very aerodynamic, and you're running other stuff off of it. Zabzi just said solar on the roof.
Yes, there is on this. I think just to run it when you're at the campsite.
Mm-hmm. So that makes sense too. I'm going to be doing a solar integrated project with my Lightning soon. I haven't really talked about that yet, but I'm going to have a custom solar installation done on my truck. I'm not going to reveal too many details about that, but really soon too. I think in the next month. So wow. I'm going to be like a beta tester for a new product that's coming out, I'm excited to be involved with this project. So
Very cool.
See. It's made by a company called Worksport. So if I tell you the name of the company, you'll probably figure out what I'm talking about.
Everyone's just Googling that now, aren't they? Straight after the show. But we should probably call it a day there, actually, isn't it? A couple of us and you guys in the comments have been amazing this week. Thank you so much for chipping in with everything that we've talked about. And next week on Wednesday, our Battery Bargains midweek episode, finding you deals on new and used EVs. Dom should be back for that. And, of course, next Friday as well, when Dom will be pressing all the buttons and back in charge. But for now, I think we'll call that a day. That's another one in the books. We got away with it, Tom. Just about.
Thanks for hanging out with us this week, guys. I hope we weren't too boring.
Not too boring. Mega. That's really cool. It's the end of our show this week. But of course, let's keep the conversation going in the comments section, particularly on YouTube. That's a really good place to do it. Even if you're listening to the audio version in your ears while you're walking the dog or at the gym and you want to say something to us, a good place is the YouTube channel. Batteries Included podcast. Search on YouTube and hit subscribe while you're there. But then leave a comment about all the things that we've talked about, a bunch of other stuff we never got to this week. But we love to see what you are talking about. And, of course, on social media as well.
So, Martin, you see Dom's in the comments section.
Is he?
Yeah. Dom, could you say ciao and end the show in the comments section, please? We'll wait for that. Come on.
Come on, Dom.
We can't end the show until Dom says ciao.
That's the rule. Like, we have to stay on till Dom says ciao. If I was Dom, I wouldn't type it.
All right, Dom. You know, the world's waiting for you.
We're not going anywhere, Dom.
We'll just sit here.
I got all the time in the world to sit in.
And there it is. Ciao.